All right. Thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I am a therapist from Boston. If you've never been in here before, thank you so much for giving me a try. I appreciate you. What I do is I get to talk to amazing people that are doing things to empower others by sharing their story. I have a special guest. I'm going to have you introduce yourself to my audience, please.
Absolutely. So my name is Cordan James. I'm a motivational speaker and founder of the Comeback Kids Mentorship Program.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. So I found Corden on social media. I believe somebody had shared your platform, and it was very interesting. So I've never had a conversation with Corden, but I think it's an important conversation to have. So I kind of want to start from the beginning because this mentorship program that you're doing sounds amazing. I don't work with kids, but I do know the importance of people that are passionate about kids, because if we can reach them at a younger age, that would be so much better. But so you kind of grew up somewhat in the foster care system. So tell people a little bit about your upbringing so they can have a sense of who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you. So my story starts off in 1987. My mother was living in Los Angeles at the time, in the cocaine 80s, and it really got wrapped up in the drugs and life, to where I was put into the foster care system upon birth. So I was born with an addiction.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
she had abandoned me in the hospital, and I was in the foster care system until I was about 3 years old. So living in Los Angeles, one day I got adopted. I got adopted to a white family, and
Hmm.
I was moved from California to Utah. Uh,
Oh, so you was in California up until 3, started off in the foster care system. As far as the being born addicted to substances, did that how did that affect you as a child?
I would say it affected me. Just I was always in therapy, always seeing a
Okay.
psychologist, therapist.
Okay.
Um, Around the age of like 5 years old, I had been caught drinking cough syrup. Right back when it used to have codeine in it.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so I went to rehab around 5, 6 years old.
Okay, so it's not does somebody because you're 5, so you don't really understand addiction, do you? No, but you probably tasted it, like maybe you got sick one time and they gave it to you, and maybe your system gravitated towards that.
I would imagine so. I mean, it was to the point I would
Oh,
just open
wow.
it, and drink it, and eventually my
Oh,
parents
wow.
had to do something.
So California, I'm not familiar with Utah, but I can't imagine there's a lot of people that look like us out there. So you're in a white family, um, and have all of these issues. Forget just being black, but you just have all these other issues. What was that experience like, being in Utah, as a black male?
Very tough. Again, you said there's not a whole lot of black people. Um, there was three other black kids my age that were there for a couple of years, and then from then, it wasn't really until my ninth grade in high school where I spent time with another black person.
Oh,
So much of my experience was lent to that. This experience of growing up black, this experience of growing up in an all-white family, racist grandfather, racist older brother, just racism very much in my face, but also just trying to be a little boy and fit into this
yeah.
family, fit into what their family structure looks like. And
You it was it a mom and was it a two-parent household you were adopting into?
yeah,
And so you said their son, so the older brother was racist. What do you think made them want to adopt you if there was this racism in the family?
mm, I would say that's probably out of their own personal love. They had done some foster
Oh,
care
okay.
previous to me growing up. In Utah, they a lot of Native American reservations, and so there was tons of programs that were going through where Native American families were giving their children for adoption or foster care, and
Yeah.
so my adoptive family had done that previous to me, and they had
Oh,
fostered
okay.
several children previous to me. They ended up adopting one child before me, who's white. He's about a year older than I am, and then I came. Um,
Wow. You with the it sounds like you recognize your foster parents did it out of love. So it sound are you saying they did the best that they could, like as far as trying to acclimate you into the world?
Yeah. I work as a consultant now, working with adoption agencies and speaking about my transracial adoptive experience, just because my parents didn't have resources. There wasn't other Black people to go
Right,
ask,
right,
how do I do his hair, or how do I take care of his
right,
skin? Just
right.
basic questions that I had around being Black. Um,
Wow.
yeah, just not having that support. So again, kind of being raised white, right? Raised just like everybody.
Okay.
But it was always very evident that there was a color difference. I knew my story from a very young age. They had told me that your mother struggled with this, your father was in gangs, and kind of gave me that lens of deterrence. Don't live this way. Here's what smart,
Yeah.
successful Black people are doing. Look
Oh
at Michael
wow.
Jordan. Look elsewhere. Um,
Okay, okay. Now, even though you had the lens of being Black, did you have do you feel like you had a safe space to talk about it, or did you internalize some of the incidents that would come up?
always internalized, I think, and that
Yeah.
internally it turned to anger, and I started fighting a lot. Just
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, just as I got older, again, I grew up in a very, very small town, graduating class of like 30. So I grew up with these kids
Oh,
my whole life. Uh,
oh, okay.
so my whole life, so just always growing up with each other. I felt like everybody at one point or another tried to throw out the N word. They
Damn.
was their easy way to go to, and I internalized that very much. So was very sensitive about the word being Black. Um, my I can tell you stories of like my neighbor next door. His father was very competitive. Anything that I did, that he did, he had to win. Whether it was football, sports, he had to be better than the Black kid. Um,
Damn.
so just always having that competition, that expectation. I kind of felt like I answered for all Black people as a little boy.
Dang. So you felt pressure. You had a lot of you felt pressure on you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Now
it's
you oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so did you end up graduating from that small town in Utah?
So so to kind of go into my story, so I was adopted from the age of 3 up until I was 12. So 12 years old, I went back into the foster care system from 3 to 18, or excuse me, 13 to 18.
Was
So
that due to the fighting and was that due to
um, excuse me, I would say that was an escalation of things. Again, being a young teenager, excuse me, we just grew further apart as mom, dad, and child. Um,
oh,
yeah, they had a lot going on. It was supposed to just be, I'm fighting a lot. It was supposed to be more like intensive therapy, but it ended up being 5 years and kind of the disconnection of my family during that time as well.
well, the initial them taking you in, was that supposed to be temporary initially, or was that permanent?
I mean, I was adopted. I,
Yeah, you were okay. That's what I was okay. So, for like those were your parents for all intents purposes. What I mean, did it feel like you were being thrown away? Because it's different being in foster care than adoption.
Yeah, I just, I think on that note, I just felt like I got treated differently than the other kids. Like when I got into
Okay.
trouble, it was like throw him into the system. We're kind of scared of him. But
Yeah.
other
Oh, right, right, right.
other siblings when they
And
went through theirs was like, oh, we got you.
yeah.
Here's rehab. Here's some help.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And what Corden is saying, it happens a lot. When I did work in the Boston Children's Hospital in the ER, I remember my white counterparts, their framing of things with black kids and white kids just look totally different. And this I don't think people sometimes even realize the stigma that is happening in the medical model and the mental health model. I've seen like some doctors do some really cool TikToks and things on how to help with the biases to show how they're questioning that they're asking to black families and white families look different. So it sounds like even though your adoptive parents had good intentions, there were some biases that were bleeding into the way that things were handled with you. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very accurate, even to this day, for sure.
Okay, okay. So now, like, because I adopted my kids at 7 and 6. I can't imagine, like, and they were special needs. They're my biological cousins, and when I got them, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? But the idea to put them back in the system never crossed my mind. So I can't imagine what that feels like for a young person, and already struggling in so many different areas. So I'm assuming the anger and stuff bled out into the foster care system as well.
So 13 through 18 was interesting, right? I was going to much more therapy, kind of like a day treatment program. You
Okay. Yeah.
pretty much go to school, go to therapy. You still get to go home at the end of the night. You're off weekends, but
Yeah.
that was where I was at. Um, and I had a very good therapist. I actually, again, being able to be one on one with this therapist, I feel like the modalities were different. Um,
Wow.
for once, I got like trauma informed care, right?
Yeah.
She started talking about attachment, right? Looking at my whole life history of mom
Yeah.
not in there, the separation from parents, just looking at all of that, and I felt like she actually cared about me, and I think
Wow. That's good.
that's what I really needed more than therapy, right? Was to be able to be loved
Right.
and cared about. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I would say, between the combination with her and doing social emotional learning programs, um, I understood what resilience began to mean. Um, at that time, I
Wow.
began to understand like my life can be much different. It can be exactly what I want, but it can be much different than what I've been destined to lead towards, if you will.
Oh, wow. So, the being in that was the day treatment type program with this therapist was a turning point for you, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And again, I'm growing up, right? 13 through 18, I'm kind of more
Yeah.
independent, figure things out for myself. Also feeling that responsibility that, I,
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I have to do this for me because no one else is going to do it for me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's probably bring most of your life, that resilience piece of especially being the only one and being different in the family. It sounds like you've been very intuitive and smart from a young age. Just like the way you said, I've always kind of recognized it. Sometimes it takes an incident and it clicks for people, but for you, it sounds like you've just always been very in tune to your reality.
Yeah, I think I don't know if
Yeah,
I was just raised with that high level of awareness, but with that is kind of the devil's in the details, right? That high level,
yeah,
I'm very culpable for many things, um,
yeah,
and that's taken time to understand the responsibility. Again, not blaming myself for things I did when I was a little boy, things I
yeah,
didn't know,
yeah.
traumas that I had repressed that I didn't really recognize, um,
Right, right, right.
until like my teenage years when I finally,
Was able to get it out.
yeah, yeah, I would say
Okay.
16 was like my turning point.
So now you turn 18, and then what does life look like for you? Because there's only so much as far as a foster care system. I know it's not like it depends. Sometimes people get good aftercare, and some people get kicked to the curb. What was that for you?
So first, I had an amazing foster family. The second foster family, the Critchfields, I was with them from 14 to 18. Excuse me, they were absolutely amazing. So I always had great support with them. So they
Nice.
brought the conversation as far as like college, what do you want to do? So senior year, I got out of the day treatment program and stepped down. So I was able to, go to just regular group therapy, not doing day treatment programs.
Hmm.
Was able to be released back to mainstream high school. So I spent my senior
Hmm.
year boards, working a job. I was working at Target, um, and I decided I want to go to college for psychology. So
Wow.
graduated high school, aged out of the system. Took me a few months of graduating. Moved down to Southern Utah and pursued my degree in psychology. But then, like life hit me, right? I feel like my experience at 18 is much different than many people's experience at 18 if they didn't grow up in the system or in programs. Like
Yeah.
13 through 18, I didn't date. I didn't, it wasn't hanging out with friends. It wasn't freedom to go drive a car, driver's license.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much I'm free at 18, and now I got my own. I got to get my own place, pay my own
Yeah.
bills, with no support.
Damn.
So I ended up reconnecting
Mm.
with my adopted brother. Like I said, my adopted family had adopted a boy that's a year older than me,
Yep.
and I
Hmm.
reconnected with him when I graduated high school. Um, and that reconnected me back with the adopted family, and that was just it was a lot. Long story short, just I'm finding that there's addiction in my adopted family. Um, Horrible addictions. Again, I've been gone for 5 years, so I'm not aware of it. So I'm just starting to get used to it, figure out what's going on. 6 months
Yep.
later, my adopted father passes away 6 months later.
Damn.
That was just like a whole rock to them more so. Again, we hadn't been talking for a few years. It was just rocked the
Right.
family. So I had went home, kind of just swept everything under the rug with my mom and said, I'm going to help you, help you clean up the house. So she had given me this
Yeah.
letter. She had given me this letter from 1992 from Los Angeles, and I opened the letter and it says
Yeah.
name. It says Cordan Havron has biological siblings. It tells me that I have 6 biological siblings that I had no clue about my whole
Oh,
life.
snap.
Now I was one of those
Oh,
kids that
wow.
always knew my story. I always knew my story, and I was one of those kids that
Yeah.
always looked for my mom, right?
Oh, wow.
So when I finally got that piece of paper, again, I'm in college. I went back to college, got on MySpace, was typing in names, typed in a name, seen a young black boy.
For young people, MySpace is a old social media. It's the old social media platform before Facebook and all that. MySpace was popping.
Right? It was good stuff. The music, your top 5 friends
You were
list.
coding. Yeah, we were doing a little coding back
Right,
then, I think.
right, absolutely.
Just in case. Go ahead. Sorry, Corday.
You're good. You're good. So yeah, so I'm in college at the library. I log into MySpace, type in a name, and I see a young black face. And I'm like, send him a message. Hey, I'm looking. I know you don't know me. I'm looking for so and so. Any information would be good. A couple hours later, I got a message back, and it was like, "Hey, big bro, we've always known about you. Here's my phone number."
Oh, snap.
Right. So then my next question, again, the only knowledge that I was provided with was that my mom struggled with prostitution and drugs, and
Right, right,
my dad was a gang member. So
right, right,
I couldn't conceptualize if mom was still alive, dad,
right,
however that. And
right.
then he told me like, "Do you want to talk to mom?" I'm like, well, yeah.
Oh
And
my
that honestly,
gosh.
that took her a couple of hours to call me. I thought it was going to be like this immediate, like, hey, I found you guys. Call, she's going to call me right now. It took her a couple of hours for that to sit in there. So long story short, 17 years later, because I'm 35 now, I was 18 at the time. We are still in touch. Um, I have 6 biological siblings. They're all in Los Angeles. Mom is doing well. Um, and yeah, it's kind of a happy story.
What did it feel like for you was there any resentment or anything around the fact that the kids were with your mom and you were not?
Ooh, I wouldn't say that was a major feeling that I felt.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely had questions like, why did you come and get me? What's the
Yeah.
story? What's going on? But again, my mother still continued. Speak freely. My mother has continued to struggle with her addiction up until recently. So
Okay.
they kind of grew up with mom and her addiction and
Okay.
being raised by older siblings, being raised by cousins, aunts and
Okay.
uncles. So they didn't go to foster care like I did, but they had their own. Uh,
Struggles. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So when you say college, your world was turned upside down. There's a lot of like connections, adoptive, biological, and when Corden's talking about from 14 to 18 being in a system where you're kind of told what to do and how to do it, and there's a time for everything, and then like now you're pushed out, and it doesn't sound like there was no transition where you can like get ready for that like adulthood. Is that fair? Do you feel like that's fair to say like that was hard?
Yeah, I mean, we had like a transitional living class, like learn how to write a
Hmm.
check, how to budget, things
Hmm.
like that. But hard life skills to be out into the real
Yeah.
world, it was
Yeah.
tough. It was
Yeah.
tough. It was really a lot. Um, Again, I'm learning how to date at this time, and ended up getting my girlfriend pregnant. Um, so pretty much 4 months after graduating high school, she's pregnant. Um, so I've been a father almost immediately after graduating high school. There wasn't really that
Hmm.
breathing room. Um,
Hmm.
and that's been a big thing becoming a parent.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
my kids. So I have 3 kids now, and my kids were like my first blood I ever met in my whole life. Holding my son
Yeah,
for
I
the
know. Yeah.
yeah.
What did you do with the because there's a lot of emotions happening, right? Like as you're navigating life, like what was your outlet during these adult
Oh.
years?
So back in high school, I was really big into breakdancing, really big into poetry.
Oh,
I
okay.
Poetry, Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost, just all of them. So that was my out.
Oh, you're
Was
artist.
yeah, dancing, writing music. So I was a competitive breakdancer, um, and just wrote poetry whenever I could.
Kids don't know that either with breakdancing.
I wish they did. Like that's a the community that comes from like a breakdance crew. Awesome.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So now, how do you end up with the Comeback Kid mentorship program? I see how it was birthed, knowing because I read about it, but understanding your story, I see the need for this there. But how was that birth? Because you don't come from a line of entrepreneurs or motivational speakers, and so I would love to hear that kind of story on when the thought happened and how you put it together.
Mm, absolutely. So I mean, I think I've always been one to share my story in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just increasing that work, I started to go to college. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree at Southern New Hampshire University, and then went on to pursue my master's. And just I think it was college that really got me in the mode of like speaking, right? All the
Oh,
assignment,
okay, okay,
personal
yeah.
reflection, and such, just had me in that flow where I'm telling my story. I got that impression. Um, but I had just been furloughed during COVID. Furloughed from I had got this amazing government job. I don't know if I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
this, but I served active duty 5 years in the U.S. Army. Um,
No, okay,
yeah, so like shortly after 18, so 19 years old, 19 to 23, was on active duty Army. Did a
okay.
combat deployment to Iraq. Um, and so that was like 2008 to 2011. Moved to Boston 2011, and then 2015 got my graduate degree. 2018
Wow.
and then 2019, what is it, 2023 now? So 2020, 2019-ish, um,
Mm-hmm.
was just curious. So the social emotional learning program I told you that I took way back in my junior year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was like, I'm curious if they're still around. So I typed in the name, which is called Why Try. So I typed in the name.
Uh-huh.
I see Christian. Christian was a brand new LCSW to the facility that I was in, and
Okay.
he had just finished creating his program, and I was one of like the first iteration to go through his social emotional learning program, right?
Okay.
So to kind of come back like again that was like 15, so to come back like 18 years later to see where they're at, and I see that they've
Yeah.
expanded the program. It's in 20,000 schools. He's using it on death row with prison inmates. Like
Wow. That's
he's
dope.
just killing it. So I sent him an inbox and I said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but back in the day, I took the Y Try program, and here's kind of what I've been able to accomplish as an adult." And so
Wow.
we connected, and now I'm a facilitator for their program. We partnership on projects, and that is
Wow.
so in the mentorship program. Excuse me. So that is the core program that I teach in my mentorship program now. So
That's dope.
the Y Try program is the first step is social emotional learning, right? So we talk about everything from defense mechanisms, um,
Yep.
that they're positive and negative according to your goal, how you use those defense mechanisms to get where you need to be. So it's a lot of like locus of control, a lot of self-empowerment. We talk about a reality ride that everybody has ups and downs. Um,
Hmm.
and what I loved most about it is back in the day, it was Christian would draw these out with, draw like a visual drawing while he's talking to you in a session. But now
Hmm.
those drawings that he used to draw are now full blown posters that
Wow.
help
That's
everybody.
so dope.
And so what I love is, again, it's visual. It's like I can sit down with a student. So typically I work with kids 10 through 25,
Hmm.
uh, social emotional learning. And just the retention of being able to, you're a therapist. There's
Hmm.
cognitive behavioral therapy, like talk therapy.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
that goes pretty far, right? That does very
Hmm.
well. I just like being able to
Hmm.
have a visual model where we can still talk,
Hmm.
kind of guide you through the intervention, this step to
Yep.
this step, and
Hmm.
they're learning. It's strength based, so we're very much going back on, what do you want, what motivates you,
Yeah.
how do you want to get there. Uh,
Yeah.
so step one
That's
again,
dope.
social emotional learning. Step two, mentoring, being able to work with me and other mentors one on one in groups, also peer mentoring. And then step three is again just being able to have the videos, the motivational speaking. I do a lot of community service work. So we get out and volunteer in the community. We feed the homeless. We do trash pickups. Um, just again, kind of bringing home that full picture of supporting who they are.
Yeah, and that's powerful. I feel like that's what's missing from life, right? We know our ABCs and one, two, threes, but how does that help us when life hits us? Because we can't stop life from happening. And I think, especially the kids now, with the pandemic, putting a pause on things with social media. I don't think social media is bad, but it gives people a false sense of reality. So if, because people tend to put highlighted reels on social media. So if I'm struggling, but I'm looking at Cordan's like highlighted reel, I'm comparing it. And so imagine if we had, and not just kids, adults too, right? If we had that inner conscious strength to understand what's going on, what we're thinking, because unfortunately we're not challenging our thoughts, right? So our mind begins to just pay attention to what's out there, and if we don't like challenge it, if we don't pay attention to what we're feeling, that social emotional is such a huge game changer when it comes to perspective on life. When I work with people, it's not that they hit the lottery or get a new house. When they start to like feel better, it's the perspective on life starts to change because they're actually involved and they're in a world, which is powerful. So I understand the program. So it sounds like when you were furloughed from work, you started to think more about your future. Is that what happened? What does life look like for me professionally?
Yeah. Well, so again, being in corporate for so long, right? Being a
Oh,
father,
right, right.
always having to make this money. And then I got furloughed, and I used to, I always had a side job doing something. So it's like to be
Mhm.
furloughed, to not have any work. Again, I'm making near six figures. Like it's life changing money for me in my life. To not have that, I was like, I was watching everybody going through COVID. I still
Yeah.
worked through COVID, so that didn't wasn't much of a difference for me. Um,
Okay.
but once I stopped working, I kind of knew. I set myself a goal. I said, I want to make posts that are going to go this direction, that give a little bit of myself. So one day I had just randomly decided I was going to tell my story on Facebook Live. Didn't
Oh,
prep it,
wow.
didn't do anything. It it went well. It was very well received. Um,
Yeah.
Within 2 weeks from there, I had two clients, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. One was in North Dakota, one was in Louisiana, right? So it's
Wow.
Zoom calls with mom and dad, Zoom calls with my mentee. Um, and
That's
then
dope.
thank you. So then it was just like, it kind of just made sense. I had some savings put together and I was like, furlough savings. I believe I can do this, or at least give myself a chance, like a couple
Yeah.
months. Let me see, just see how it goes. And it's been
Yeah.
been beautiful since then.
That's amazing. And then why the comeback kid? I really like that that name, but why where did you get the name from?
So again, the social emotional, the Y Tribe program, they always talk
Yep.
about resilience, right? And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful somebody taught me about resilience, that like your how your story starts is not how it ends. Like
Mhm.
I needed to hear that, because it felt like I
Mhm.
was just like on this dark path. Like my fate wasn't mine, right?
Wow.
I'm destined to be in a gang. I'm destined to do something, because
Yeah.
that's where I came from. And so just always
Yeah.
hearing this thing about resilience, and they, they'd always tell me like, wow, you bounce back really quick. So they started to call me the comeback kid. And
Oh.
so that's how it birthed, right? And then from then it's kind of become so much more than that, right?
Yeah.
Then it was the slogan of where comeback kids come back stronger, right?
Yeah.
And comeback kids, yes, it's a program, but it's all about like a safe space to heal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just to, a safe space to heal, to advocate, to find your inner being. Um,
Yeah.
so it's felt like a mission on my side. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times, especially now it's white parents coming to me about their adopted kids, their adopted
Okay.
black. So it's very purposeful in the sense that now I get to mentor kids that look like me, who are.
Yeah.
I live in New Hampshire, so New Hampshire again, 90% white,
Okay.
two
Yep. Yep.
percent 2% black.
Yep.
So, being able to sit in these situations, like my little client, he's got some stuff going on in school. Being able to sit with him through that, being able to talk to his mom and dad, on what the next best step is. But also, it's just like being able to build that relationship.
Mhm.
Having
Mhm.
one, I'm not going to abandon you. Two,
Yeah.
here's a little bit about my story. I do understand a little bit of pain and trauma,
Yeah. Yeah.
but also like, you can have, here's the courage to face those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a game changer. And there's I think in our culture or country, we just try to mitigate the pain instead of facing it,
Mhm.
and accepting what is. And so like, yeah, like there's money to be made, right? Like, and so there's pain in life. And I think just listening to your story, like you were not supposed to be here. I tell people all the time, like the way I grew up, like I wasn't supposed to be on here talking to you, and but I'm here, and but I had to face that pain. And I think that for anybody's listening, who obviously who wants to deal with pain, like I get it, right? Why we escape. My first career, the first population I worked with, the people that struggle with substance abuse, and I fell in love with the population, because learning about their story, realizing they're just trying to escape pain. And so the reality is that like facing it is hard, but on the other side, there's so much autonomy and power that you have. But I think without programs like yours, how would we know that, right? Like, how do I know what's on the other side if I've never seen it happen? And I come from a long line of people that have struggled with substance abuse, and I've only been in my neighborhood and I haven't heard. That's why I think storytelling is powerful. That's why AA works so well, right?
Yes. So I was able to reconnect with my therapist a couple months ago, my childhood therapist, and
Yep, yep.
she put me onto the words narrative therapy,
Hmm.
like being able to reframe your story how you want it.
Yeah, yep,
Like that has been the most power. Like to know that, like, yes, here's the facts of our story,
right.
but we can mold that.
Yep,
Um, like
yep.
that's just knowing that you can change that, and
Yeah, yeah,
being able to sit with someone like yourself, in a peer support group or an
yep,
AA, to share your story and have that light come on, to realize that you do have so much
yeah,
control over
yeah,
how you feel and how you act.
yeah, yeah. That's good.
Oh,
That's
it's
good.
a blessing.
And the narrative therapy and just the sharing, and for people that are listening, um if you don't do that, your brain only knows that story and that's it, right? So I think sometimes it's hard to think about a peer support group or therapy and just like opening up. But without that other voice, what else does your brain have to go on? And I know it's challenging to do, but I do, want you to think about like what you want your future to look like, because your perspective is going off of the experiences, which we can never get back, whether it was your fault or not. We can never go back and change the past. And I don't think people realize how much the past, when it's not dealt with, it affects the present and the future. And only person to interrupt that cycle, Cordan can't interrupt my cycle. My husband can't like I have to interrupt that cycle. You, like the individual, is the only person that can work on by what we choose to do. And I always tell people, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So it's hard. And I never want a message to be, oh, just do this and do that, it's going to be fine. Like as Cordan talked about, there was a lot of challenges, but it sounds like you kind of kept facing them. And that's why you're here now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. If people wanted to work with you or learn more about the program, tell them how they can reach you.
Absolutely. So if you go on cordanjames.com, you'll see my programs, my website there, and also my booking link.
Okay. And then not just the program, but you also speak. And I can only imagine just how powerful your voice is. Because again, I always say Alcoholic Anonymous has been around for so many years, because when you walk in there and you hear somebody's story that's similar to yours, there's this like light bulb that goes off. So there are so many different parts of your story, even if people didn't have the same story. I mean, going to rehab at 5 and just kind of like the people that you grew up as your parents, like you had to go to another. There's just so many different parts where abandonment and all this stuff comes up for you that for people listening, that's a familiar feeling. And to see how you're here now, that has to be powerful for people. So I just want people to know that you're not alone, and that it is hard, but not facing it doesn't change anything. I always say if what you're doing isn't working, like why not give something else to try? Like,
yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I think on that note, like I hope, not only do I hope that people find the courage, but also like
yeah,
there's value in like I realize, with friends sometimes there's not that awareness. Right? They've never heard that.
yes,
They've never heard that conversation. Like
yep,
it just has never they've never been able to question why they do what they do or how they are
yeah,
or what they
yeah,
are. It's just, how do I cover it up?
yeah.
Right.
Which
And
makes
it's
sense. I'm like, it just I think people that struggle with substance abuse they're ostracized from society, but it's the same with food addiction, sex addiction, shopping addiction. It just has so many more ramifications. But I think we don't realize how much, even work. I was the worker, work in school. That was my addiction. That's how I covered it up. And it wasn't until I was finished with school, I realized like, oh, I'm struggling. Right. So
right.
I think it's really important, like you said, to the awareness piece. Like that's a huge start. And I didn't realize like that was what was happening, because work is acceptable to society.
Yes.
So I would have never thought like I was like working too much and driving myself to a deeper end instead of facing it. I didn't know how to face it, right?
Sure.
So that's a great point that you bring up.
Absolutely. Just being able to see like our trends, our own patterns.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
You talked about addiction being more around work for you. For me, it's always been like relationship, right? Like that search for
Yep.
that whole mommy wound, like searching for love and relationship.
Oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. And I think when people realize that pattern, to have grace with yourself, because beating yourself up doesn't work. And you're not being fair. Because I always say, if a kid came to you and talked about it the same way you're talking to me, would you say that's dumb or what's wrong with you? And they always say they would never say that. It's like, well, why do we do that to ourselves? Like, so like as Corden's talking about, like, because relationship, I can see how the relationship piece like came in for you as a addictive like pattern. When you realize this stuff, it's really important for people to have grace, because walking around with the bully in your head, it's hard to do anything different. It's like, okay, this is the pattern. How can I interrupt the cycle? That's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wait, before you go, I would love to hear what you're like. What's your self-care routine like now? Like, what's keeping you like on this path right now?
Um, I think my first thing is just being able to do this work every day.
Hmm.
I get to do this full
Yeah.
time. To be in this space
Nice.
full time is definitely a huge part of my self care. But my day starts off with meditation, affirmations. I don't know if anybody knows Londrell. He's a black man, and he does long affirmations. Just being able to hear, "I am worthy, I am loved," and it's coming from a black man. It's just
That
great.
feels
But
good.
I would say, like, another thing that's been powerful for me is like this reading. I've been reading Black and Buddhist.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay. Nice.
yeah, so just started studying like Buddhism and peace. I've always been doing meditation and such, but I just like the concepts of Buddhism and what it teaches. But just the lens of like being Black and Buddhist and being able to
Hmm.
apply those Buddhist principles into
Hmm.
being Black, like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just my life is all about healing today.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't want to hurt. I don't want to hurt anybody else. Um,
Yeah.
so my demeanor is just I, I try to keep as peaceful as possible. Meditation music,
Yeah.
control the music that I'm listening to, control the books that I'm reading, the people that I'm around, taking time out to myself. I love,
Yeah.
being alone in the house or going to get myself some food. Um,
Yeah.
making sure I maintain my great relationships with friends and family.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I still go
That's
to
good.
I still go to therapy. I was in therapy. I don't know what today is. A couple days ago. I still go to therapy every other week. Um, and I'm just always trying to learn self-help books.
That's good. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the books that I love are by Buddhist authors. And what the way Corden is describing kind of his routines, and he said we're always healing. It doesn't have to be this dire, like drastic thing. It's just what we do. And it's at the beginning, it does feel hard because you're trying to create new practices. But a lot of the books that I've read that I love are from Buddhist authors. And I think they're not think I know that their like kind of philosophy is the way that I've learned to live life. When people are around me, they always talk about like they feel this overwhelming sense of peace, and I always try to share with people it's available to them. But we live in a culture and a society that does not center the struggle and make it like, okay, what can we do? It's like you need this or you need that. Not It's not empowering, right? And so the affirmations that Corden's talking about, the meditation, he's giving himself medicine, right? Like that every day that allows him to live life and not survive life. He's curating his environment, being mindful of what he listens to, what he reads, right? So I just want to encourage somebody that's listening to look at your environment. And it's not just people, it's literally like what you're entertaining. And it's not bad to look at certain things, or I like reality shows. I love some bloggers, but that's not my only source of literature. Right. And so there has to be some balance. Like I love cheeseburgers, but I can't have it. I love chocolate cake. I cannot have chocolate cake every day. And I think that because our culture and society doesn't talk about like moving our body, the foods we eat, or what we're entertaining, like you don't see that on the commercials. You see pharmaceutical companies that will put up, if you're feeling this and that here, what about this? It's like this magical thing. There's no magical pill that will take pain away. Like there's none, and it may help, but it won't take it away. And so I just want to encourage people to take their power back by just looking at their environment and what they're entertaining and what they're doing, so that you can change the trajectory of the way your mind is, because the mind goes at the direction that we bring it, and if you're not giving it any other thing, it's only going to focus on what you're entertaining. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Okay.
That's a beautiful.
Okay, you help me with what you did. What your practice is like. It was just a quick reminder for people, because I try to use this platform as teaching
Yeah,
and just like pulling from stories, just so people can see where they can like implement change. Because I don't think there's enough of that.
abs-
So yeah.
absolutely. I think it's important to be able to give the people something to take home with them, like those
Yes.
what can they do today? Because
Yes.
a lot of people need help right now,
Right now.
right?
Exactly.
Or they're
Exactly.
going to make a wrong decision for their life.
Yes, yes. So, Cordan, thank you so much. This was amazing. I appreciate you and your transparency and what you're doing. I know you're helping a lot of people. If you guys are looking for the links to any of the things he's talked about, you can check out the show notes. They will be in there. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.